occupied one of the nicest, richest Jews' house. They threw him out of the house. And the next thing we knew is that they formed a Judenrat. The next thing we heard that we can't walk on the street only with yellow stars. We can't walk on the sidewalk, only on the gutter. We can't be on the street after 7 o'clock at night. These were laws all posted by the Judenrat now, not by, in German and in Hungarian and Yiddish. And I remember this fellow Moskop Lotzi. He was the chairman of the Judenrat. He was a well-to-do wood. He was dealing in wood, in raw wood. And after that, they took 40 of the most well-to-do Jews and put them in a shul, and they locked up the shul with wooden barracks, with wooden planks, and they were there as hostages to that the rest of the community will obey the laws that the Germans are going to put out. And when going by that shul, they were torturing them constantly. You heard such screams out of that synagogue that when I think of it now, my heart takes an extra beat. Because we knew who was in there. It was the most representative Jews of the city. And after those Jews were put in there, the first order from the Judenrat to put together 1,000,000 pangers for the German war effort. 1,000,000 panger was the Hungarian money, was an awful lot of money for the Jews of our community to put together. And the Judenrat assessed everybody how much to give. And I remember they assessed my father 10,000 panger. It was an awful lot of money for him. And everybody went to the Judenrat to bother and cry and I can't. And finally, and remember, this was over the threat, if you don't come up with the money, those 40 hostages will be killed. So finally, they did put the money together and they gave the Germans the money. And then every day different orders came out, all kinds of orders. Some of them I don't even remember. But what stands out in my mind is the first day of Pesach. Incidentally, we had matzahs yet for that Pesach, but in Sigeta it wasn't enough matzahs, and the Sigeta roof allowed openly that they should eat beans on Pesach, because there wasn't enough to eat. But we didn't need any beans, we had enough potatoes. And what stands out in my mind that Pesach, and up until today, I don't enjoy the Seders, because we had the room darkened because of the airplanes was already war conditions, where my father had the Seder, and we had these European low houses where you could, over the window, reach in and pick somebody out from bed. And my father didn't know from no chachmas. He started, well, he is hollering, Shom Dulav Seine, and the Germans, so we can hear Germans speaking outside, and I was afraid they're going to shoot in. And I kept on telling my father, Tata, stiller, stiller. And he just hollered at my mother, Surah, take him away from my Seder. Lass mich verstehen, my Seder. Take him away from my Seder. And this went on to the Seder. I was already old enough to understand. The other children were younger. To speak up again. We never dared speak up against my father. And I fought with him all through the Seder. And he didn't want to stop. He kept on saying the Seder right out loud like he always did. And that, every Seder until today, to me, reminds me of me fighting with my father. The next day, something else occurred that's also very, very tragic. They called for 50 boys, the Germans, to come in the morning at 9 o'clock to report to their headquarters. My name was on the list. I was my father's oldest son, and I was his diamond. He was very proud of me. My father took my younger brother and substituted him for me. In case they kill, they should, and don't misunderstand for 1 minute that my father didn't love all his children. But should there be a choice, he would rather have my younger brother, my Chaim, go, and I can just feel what went on into his heart to substitute my brother for me going to the Germans that day. It so happened they returned. They just took him for the day to dig ditches. But my brother went, and when they called Abraham Ben Zellinger at that point, he reported yes, and he went into. That stands out to him. That was on the first day of Pesach. And then we went through the whole Pesach, and right a few days after Pesach, the order came out that they're forming a ghetto. And they designated which areas they're going to move in, and by Sunday, our turn was to go into the ghetto. In the meantime, my father had negotiated with this Jakob Janusz, who took away my father's business, that he should hide his whole family. We were 7, and my father and mother were 9. And we went into, he had a deep basement where he lived, very deep under the mountains. And we went in there, all 9 of us, and we stayed there for 3 days. My father, one child cried, and one child screamed. We had to keep quiet, and didn't have what to give him to eat. So my father says, after 3 days, to this Jakob, I can't go on. First of all, I have 5 married children and 21 grandchildren. They are outside. I'm going to save myself and leave them there. I'm going to go back into the ghetto with my family and just leave my oldest son here. So we all went back there, back to the home. And Saturday, before the Sunday they were supposed to get to the ghetto, I was told to go to the goy. My father called me in the room. I should go alone with him in the other room. And I didn't want to go because I know he wanted to kiss me goodbye, and I felt if he does, I won't go. And my mother just stood there and looked. So then he says, all right, he had a Omega watch, a pocket watch, not gold, just a plain Omega watch. And he says, take this with you. And he told me where he hid by the goy the money and whatever jewelry he had in the basement. He told me where it was. The lachters, the silver lachters he put there, or whatever valuables he had. And again he came close and wanted to, and I said, okay. And I also knew that Motzei Shabbos, my father is going to cut off his beard, because you have to cut off your beard before you go into the ghetto. So I didn't want to see him without the beard, so I left during Shabbos yet. And I went out of the house. I said, I'll see everybody. I didn't want to make it like this is the last time I see them. I'll see you soon, nothing will happen, everything will be all right. And I walked out of the house, and there was a long block that I walked in, and I could feel that they're both at the window looking after me. And I was tempted to turn around, and I fought with myself that if I turn around, I'll go back. I didn't turn around, and I never saw them, and I went into the goy. And that's where I stayed. This is a chus now, and I stayed a chus by the goy of Baidim on the attic for about 4 weeks, while the ghetto was there for about 4 weeks. The goy communicated with my father. He went into the ghetto every day. He brought me something to eat from my mother. They had nothing. I remember Shavuos. My father sent me a little eggs and onions, similar to that my mother made. And he says, in case you think that's, he wrote letters with the goy to me to the ghetto. One of them I had left with me. And he wrote to me that in case you think that's not enough, we have even less here. And then the goy went back one day and he said to my father, he can't keep me because I don't want to eat what he gives me treif. And he can't keep me with eating, he can't give me kosher. So he brought me back a letter from my father, which I still have also, saying, I order you, b'gzeiras kibedav, the order of a father, to eat treif, with tears in my eyes. You know how hard it is for me to write this, but I order you to eat it. Because he was talking to this Jakob. And he brought me back this letter. Once I got the letter, ordered my father, I started eating. I couldn't get enough of the, I enjoyed it. I started to like the ham. Used to be, I eat it. And we stood there for about, incidentally, my father was taken out of the ghetto because he was a foreigner. He was a Polish. And it almost saved him because they put him in jail with the whole family because they weren't sending away foreigners. They were only sending away out of the country the Hungarian Jews. And the one transport went away to Auschwitz. The second transport went away to Auschwitz. My father and mother were still in the jail with all the children. And incidentally, my sister who survived tells me that we had next door to the jail a goy who we used to buy the milk from every day. And we were very friendly with them, and they were teasing them. Are you now having a bicycle? Are you now having all the goodies? Through the windows from the jail. And they took us, they took the two transports away, and from where I was standing on the attic, I could see where they marched them to the train station, because where I lived by the goy in the attic was only 2 blocks away from the train. Then the final transport, when they took the Judenrat and the Gisterhof, and was only 1 or 2 train cars, they went to the jail and they took my father and family out and put them in there too, and they took him also. And that's when I saw them. They went away to Auschwitz, and I didn't know where they went. I'm saying now they're Auschwitz. And the guy came and told me that they took my family away, don't know where. And he told me that he can't keep me here because he was there alone. His family was in a little village called Toktahorkain near Miskolc. He's going to take me to his wife and daughter. He's got a wife and a daughter and mother. And he's going to keep me there on the attic because here he can't take care of me, he can't feed me. And plus, the Russians were only about 40 kilometers from Khust. They were in Yasin already. And he was afraid of the Russians also. They're going to come. He came here as a Hungarian conqueror to take away a Jewish business. He was afraid. All the Hungarians at that point thought that the whole war is, by the Russian side, the American side, to save the Jews. They didn't realize that there were other things at stake. So the Hungarians thought if somebody will say that he took away a Jewish business, that he will be killed. So he wanted to go further away from the Russians, and he shouldn't be in the place where he confiscated a Jewish store. So, and a Jew couldn't travel no more. Oh, incidentally, while we were in the ghetto yet, my brother-in-law's daughter, who survived, who's living today in Brooklyn, Rivchu Zoldan was the name home. Today, here she is called Rivchu Berman. He took her out of the ghetto and took off the Yellow Star, gave her his daughter's papers, and took her on the train to Budapest, which is a 20-hour ride. And he went into a Jewish house in Budapest and said, "This is a Jewish girl," and he left her there and came back. And she survived in Budapest that way. Otherwise, she would have gone to Auschwitz with her parents. So then when they took my parents away into the Auschwitz, he says, "We have to go to Miskolc. It's a long ride. How are we going to go?" So he took one of those wooden boxes, like a sitting bench with an enclosure, and he put me in there, gave me a bottle of water, and he nailed it down. And inside he bore out a couple of small holes, I should have air, and he put me in the box and he wrote sugar and books because that's a heavy content when they'll pick me up. And he rented a truck. He had a truck because he had a trucking company also in Khust. And he took a truck with truck drivers to load up his furniture because he was moving his stuff also, so it shouldn't be obvious that just a box. And amongst them, he put my box up there. They put me up. And it so happened where my holes for air were, they put me up against the wall of the truck. And I started feeling shortness of breath. But he was watching me, and he saw it, so he came up on the truck, and he moved me away, and I was able to breathe easier. And we started the drive to Miskolc. And in a place called Neubanya was a very big ghetto, and they stopped us there because they were they were searching every car that they shouldn't smuggle Jews out. And they kept us there about 6 hours by the checking point. And I could hear Jewish people, by the ghetto, I could hear Jewish people talking outside. But at the later point, though, I passed out because it was very hot. This was in the summertime. In the spring, but it was sometimes in June already. And the water, I had no more water left. So I was semi-conscious. And that's how we arrived to, when we arrived to talk to Horkheim, I was still semi-conscious. I remember him just vaguely carrying me up on his shoulder to the attic. When I came through, a couple hours later, I remember he brought me cooked wine. Hungarians drink cooked wine. And that revived me. And he told me, this is where you're going to stay. But you have to stay quietly, because my wife is not going to know that you are here. And my daughter neither, just my mother. Because he tells me my wife likes to take a drink once in a while. Sometimes we fight. She'll get mad at me or she'll get drunk. She'll go out in the street and tell I have a Jew up here. We'll be in big trouble. So in order for them not to hear, you have to sit still. I will give you a signal in the ceiling. I will knock the ceiling 3 times. That means that she's out of the house. You can walk around. I will give you one knock as a sign that she's here. And that's how my life started for about 9 months in that attic. First, he started to promise me, I started to cry, I can't be here alone. It's a dark attic. And he says, your sister Blima will come too. And that kept me going for 2 weeks. Then he promised me that Rift Jew from Budapest is going to bring, but he wasn't going to bring anybody, he was just pacifying me. And in the morning, he would bring up my daily food, a piece of bread and a piece of meat or cheese and a bottle of wine and water, and a pot where I would be my toilet. At night he would come, he would only come up in the morning and at night. At night he would come up and take the pot down and wash it out and bring it back clean, because the stench shouldn't keep me from sleeping. And in the morning he would bring it back clean and bring me back food. And his wife would tell him, something's wrong with you, you eat too much, because he would take from his food, if she cooked something, and he would put it away and then bring it up to me. And he would eat, you're eating a lot, and you're not putting on any weight. He was telling me. There were times when he would bring me downstairs, just from the attic to his living room, when the family was out, and listen to the radio, to the news. And I heard that to London, which was forbidden, there's a very strict law against that. And we heard that they took the Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz, where they're killing him. And so we knew already what the situation was. But we went on for months and months, and I had made a hand calendar to know when Yom Tov will be, when Rosh Chodesh is. And before I left, my father gave with me a Sefer Noam al Melech. This is the Sefer by Rabbi Melech Sefer. He says that will be my Shmira Sefer. And I knew that by heart by the time I came out. But I was sitting, just doing nothing, just sitting, and what my entertainment was from the fields. We were in a village. From the fields I could hear the farmers sing, and I was listening to them in Hungarian. And this went on, and I was constantly, in the summertime, the heat was unbearable. The water that he would bring up in the morning, by afternoon it was hot, and by night it just dried out. I had nothing left. And this was a tin roof I was under, and the heat was unbearable. I remember the whole time I never washed or bathed or anything or shaved. I was still youngster, but I had already a little hair here. My hair here grew down. And life went on like this, and then when the Russians started to move, he, he decided to make an escape hatch. Underneath the ladder on the steps, where we went up to the two escape hatches he made. When we went up underneath, he put bricks underneath the stairs, so in case somebody comes, he gave me a warning. I go in there and put the bricks back up and stay inside. He opened part of the roof from the tin, and he had a screw from inside. In case he's giving me a knock, the warning will be 4. He give me 4 knocks. That means to go out on the roof, open up the roof, and go lay down flat in case somebody's coming to search the attic. I never needed it, I never used it, but this was the escape hatch was made. And in the meantime, his mother would bring me up food, and sometimes, and I had a feeling that she isn't too happy about this whole arrangement. And one time she brought me up a soup, and I found a thumbtack in the soup. And I thought that she wanted to kill me, that I should swallow it. I was a youngster. And I thought that she wanted to kill me, so for the next 2 weeks, I didn't want to eat nothing but bread. Or if he brought me up some food, I would really search it through. I was even afraid any cooked bread, I was afraid she'd put poison in it. Then about 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, I started to think, and she came up in the attic and talked to me, so I decided that she's not going to kill me. And this went on for a long while until the Russian front started to come closer, and we could already hear the shells flying, the bullets flying. And the airplanes were flying at night bombing. A few nights, he didn't want to leave me in the attic. He took me, as soon as it got dark, he took me down to the basement, to the shelter. And when everybody else had to go down the shelter, he would sit on top of me. It was dark in the shelter. He would sit on top of me so his wife and his daughter wouldn't hear any movement. They couldn't see, it was totally dark. He made sure of that. And a few times I went down there at night when the airplanes came. And then the Germans moved into the house also. They occupied this house as the front came nearer. And the Germans had a habit searching the house through to make sure it's safe. And I could hear already a German coming. I was going already to the hatch, but he went back for some reason. And I stood there, and then when this Jakob Janusz came up in the attic, I told him, listen, they're going to catch me sooner or later. They're going to kill us both. Why don't I go down and report to the Hungarian police and tell them I was in the wilderness, in the forest, and this way at least you won't be in danger. He says, no, I took you from your father alive. Either we'll both survive or we'll both get killed. You stay right where you are. So I stood there. Then when about 3 or 4 days before the Russians came in, Horthy, the president of Hungary, denounced the Germans and threw out the Hungarian fascist government and declared that he wants to make peace with Russia. And we heard this on the radio. So I said, all right, let me go down. It's already the Hungarian, because he says, no, you stay right here until I see a Russian. You don't move down. A tremendous foresight that he had, because 2 hours later, Horthy was thrown over, and even a stronger fascist government took over. And they started, until then the Jews in Budapest weren't touched. They started killing even the Jews in Budapest.
When was this?
This was in 1945 already.
What time of year?
This was still in 1944 in November. Yes. So he said, and it so happens that it took Russians about 5-6 more days till they came through. If I'd go down there, I'd have gotten killed then. Then the Russians, when we heard bullets flying, not the cannons, he dug a bunker for me in the field, because here again, we didn't know how much fighting is going to be, by myself. And during the night, he took me down into that bunker and gave me some food, and I stayed in that bunker. I remember Germans passing by. I could see the German boot from the bunker, but he didn't come down. And I stayed in that bunker until I heard Russian languages talking. Then I came out, and the funny thing is, I started hollering, "Ya Žid," and I'm a Jew. And a Russian soldier on a horse hit me with a whip. He says, by us, it's not called Žid. By us, it's Yevray. That's a finer term for Jew. Hebrew instead of Hebrew. And the Russian soldiers came into the house. In the meantime, I used to tell this mother of his to give her impetus to keep me. Wait till the Russians come. The whole town will belong to you. I'll give you everything. I used to. While the Russians are there, one guy knocks me on the shoulder and says, "Come over here." I go with him in a corner. He said, "Bist du Yid?" "Yeah, ich auch Yid." "I'm a Jew too." So I started to hug him and kiss him. He says, "You are the first Jew I see since I came from the Russian front." And he had a leather pouch, a big leather pouch, and he took out from the pouch a bundle of money, thousands of pengers. Before the war, there was an awful lot of money, but the Russians printed Hungarian money in Russia. After a few weeks the Russians were there, the whole thing was worth $5. But he gave me, what am I going to do? I took the money right away and I gave it to her. So she saw the Russians are here only 10 minutes, and already she's getting so much money. Little did she know this was the last money she got. So this guy says to me, "I am on the first line. I don't know what's going to happen to me. You better keep the money." So I took it from her and I gave it to her. At night, the Russians started to drink and they're celebrating, and I had long hair. They thought I was a pope, a priest. And I said, "I'm not a priest." So they said, "If you're not a priest, let's cut off your hair." So they took a pair of scissors, they cut off my hair, and they celebrated all night. They still believe that they cut off the hair for, remember, these are communists then. That they cut off the hair of a priest. In the morning, in the meantime, the shooting is going on tremendously. This Jacob draws up a hand map that we should go further away from the front. In case the Germans make a counteroffensive, they come back. The whole village now knew that there was a Jew here, and they will kill us. So, and we started walking by foot back towards Debrecen. We walked for about 6 or 7 hours, and here is this hand map made how to go on side roads because they're fighting. We were hearing cannon shots and flying over our heads. We come to we picked up a Russian horse and buggy. It was going back. We sat in the back of the Russian buggy and we sat there. We went. He crossed. They had a wooden bridge just built over a river, Tisa.
Okay, this is the end of tape 2. We'll continue on the next tape. Thank you. This is Mr. Ben Tenenbaum. I am Rivka Waxlack. This is tape 3, May 18th, 1995. You were telling us, Mr. Tenenbaum, about how you were going back behind the lines with Mr. Janos.
So we were going, I forgot something very important to tell you before I'll go back a little step. The last 3-4 nights after the Germans came into the house, he was so afraid that the Germans will hear me move, because any slight move, they'll come up and search. His mother came up to sleep with me, so that any movement would be attributed to her sleeping up there, and she laid next to me. And she was about a 70-year-old woman, and I was at that point something like 17. And just to tell you the human side of the story, during the night when she was sleeping, I tried to put my hands all over her and hoping that she's sleeping. I think she wasn't sleeping. She enjoyed it also because she had been a widow for 30 years. and for the next 3-4 nights, she slept with me all through the night, so that the Germans wouldn't move. I thought this was an interesting story that they had. Then when we went on to the on the wagon.